Microsoft's working on an Elite Series 3, and we've got some new details. Controllers. Microsoft loves to make controllers. They've made controllers in just about every single color. I was going to say every possible combination, but realistically, there's probably still a few that they haven't done yet. But you can go over to the design lab, design the controller of your dreams, and mostly customize it from top to bottom. Microsoft loves making these things, and very clearly they are selling because Microsoft, well, continues to do so. However, at the top of the controller pyramid, at least if you're looking at a first-party accessory, is the Elite Series controller. Now, the Elite Series 2 came out several years ago, and the big question is will Microsoft make an Elite Series 3? And I think we've got our answer thanks to a survey Microsoft has started putting out. Now, before you say, Brad, a survey? A survey? Really? Because realistically, Microsoft, the console wraps that Microsoft came out with, those showed up in a survey too. So when Microsoft starts asking you questions about what things you would like to change on your Elite Series 2, it really gives us an idea about what is going to be included in the Elite Series 3 that Microsoft is likely actively working on. So let's show off here what Microsoft is probing around with. So you can find this survey in the Xbox Insider Feedback Hub, and I will tell you that this app looks really dated, but whatever, it is in there. So if you open up the survey and select Elite Series 2 controller, you get all these questions. Now, most of them don't really tell us too much, right? There's things like, how do you change volume control? Which would mean that Microsoft is maybe contemplating putting volume controls on an Elite Series 3 in some capacity. How do you adjust voice, things like that? And so when you really start to pick apart this survey, you can kind of read and put together about what Microsoft might actually do. And so that is exactly kind of what I did, honestly, is I started digging through this thing and seeing hey, what really starts to make sense here? So if you go down into the customization options that Microsoft is considering, you can look at Microsoft is really digging into thumbstick color, changing things in and out a little bit more easily. So we might see potentially, kind of reading through this, potentially being able to change the buttons easier. Right now, you can change the thumbsticks relatively easy, but the ABXY buttons, you can only change through the design lab. However, what if you could change them with you go buy your own buttons and swap them out and not have to be dependent on what Microsoft is doing? They're also really diving deep into some of the current options, such as being able to, adjust the controller or the trigger sensitivity, right? You can, on the Elite Series 2, you can quote unquote, fine tune how far the pull mechanism is. And they want to know how much you're using. Also, how much you're using the tensioning of the thumbsticks, which really kind of leads into the thing that I think most people might really be interested in here, which is more of this customization of the colors. Yeah, thumbsticks are cool, and Microsoft is contemplating looking at Hall effect thumbsticks as well. But let's be real, gamers love RGB. And Microsoft is very clearly saying, what if there was more lighting on this thing? Would that be, and is that something that you would like? And so I think we are going to see more customization on the LED lighting front, right? On the Elite Series 2, you can already change the Xbox logo button. But what if there were more, Brad? What if there were more LED customization options? I think that's something we might see. Also, the other interesting thing that Microsoft is asking about in this poll is, what about being able to change the shell color? Right now, you get one shell color and that's pretty much it. You can customize them a little bit, but you can't actively change them. But what if you could pop the shell cover off? And what if you could change it? And so that seems like that would be something that Microsoft could build into an Elite Series 3 and make it just a little bit more customizable. The other really interesting option that Microsoft is showing off is, what about being able to remove the rumble from the controller? That is super interesting to me, because I'm sure there are people out there who would absolutely remove some of the rumble right there. And again, you can see the Hall effect stuff, but to me, I locked in on that. Removing the rumble motors. Would that mean that you could actually adjust and like swap them out for something that's maybe more powerful if you really want to. But being able to remove the rumble motors would be interesting because that has two effects. One, obviously you get no rumble, which some people don't like, and which that's fine if that's your cup of tea. Have it, whatever you want. It would also make the controller lighter. Now, I tend to like a little bit heavier of a controller, so that may not impact me. But again, these options are interesting. And then overclocking. So overclocking took me for a little bit of a spin. I was like, man, what would overclocking a controller look like? I suspect that maybe it's the polling rate would be my guess, right? If you're familiar with mice and like the polling rates on mice, that same effect is on a controller as well. And so I'd be curious to see, maybe you could overclock the polling rate. Again, Microsoft has to be careful about cheating and everything else that goes along with potential overclocking. Not quite sure what else you could do besides polling rate, because again, these things are battery operated. So, really jacking up the performance in some capacity could really have a negative impact potentially on the actual length of the battery life of it. But yeah, thumbstick adjustment is a big one. For me, I like them very, very tight. So I jack that screw all the way and get it as tight as possible. And they do wear out, the tensioning mechanism. So Hall effect could be a good upgrade. And so the basic way Microsoft frames this, and this is what I find interesting, and maybe what we'll see with Elite Series 3, is you notice here they say thumbstick module upgrade Hall effect. So does that mean that it would not come with them by default, but you could get the Elite Series controller and you'd be able to swap out the thumbsticks for an upgraded component if you wanted? That to me feels a little dicey, but I mean, it could be a thing, right? You can get the tension ones that ship today in the Elite Series 3, and it's like, hey, if you want the best of the best or you want to swap them out, Hall effect thumbsticks are available and you can buy them along with covers and everything else. And so Microsoft, nickel and dime, I think is maybe one way some people will describe it, but making these things like truly fully customizable. Because if you read all the options that are in this list, you have the ability to remove the thumbsticks, remove the rumble motors, swap out potentially like the ABXY buttons, change the shells. At this point, you're really just, you're almost in like that keyboard style world of like, you just build your own controller sort of thing, right? It's like select your thumbstick, select your rumble motor, select your shell color, select maybe your LEDs. And so this survey, I think, is really kind of just giving us a little bit of insight into what this stuff might look like. So I got to thinking here, what would a controller with what I would say tasteful RGB might look like? So I came up with a couple options using just throwing things together here. So this would be one option. Now, this is not a full and actual Elite Series controller. It's close, but it's not a true Elite Series controller. But in this scenario, you would see potentially more RGB lighting up around the Xbox button, sort of that swoosh that goes below it. I don't know how you want to describe it, but that bottom area could be a place that they add RGB that makes things just a little bit more appealing. Or this is my personal favorite option, something like this. So this would be Microsoft adding a very tasteful RGB around the analog sticks, around your thumbs, and also maybe a nice little line around the bottom too. I think somewhere between here, they could potentially try to do both options depending on the styling that they go with for the actual Elite Series 3 design. But these are ways that Microsoft could, in fact, integrate RGB into the controller without them being obnoxious. Now, keep in mind, they got to be careful with battery life because battery life is always a sensitive thing at the end of the day, and turning on lights drains the battery. Although, I will tell you, I have had my Elite Series 2 for a couple years now. I think I got mine with the Taco Bell Xbox that I have lying around here somewhere. And I honestly have no issues with the battery. Like, it's fine. I'm completely fine with it. I throw it on the charger about once a week, and that's it. I haven't needed to swap it. I'm sure there are scenarios where people have had them go south. The Elite Series Xbox controllers in general have broken for a lot of reasons over the year. But for me personally, it has not been related to battery life with the controller. So somewhere between maybe something like this, which is a little bit more of an older design, although you could potentially see like the thumbsticks in this design, that's not RGB behind them. The little balls that the thumbsticks sit on, those are just orange in this setup here. But you could imagine maybe somewhere in between, maybe adding all this stuff. Again, you got to be tasteful with it. You can definitely go over the top with the LEDs and the RGBs, but maybe this is what we will see. I mean, the real big question becomes is like, when are we going to see an Elite Series 3? The fact that we're seeing this survey now actively means that Microsoft is doing their research. I don't think we're going to be seeing it like immediately by any means, because hey, like why would they be asking these questions if they're still in the design phase? knowing that and thinking about what we already know about Microsoft's roadmap, right? We've already learned, thanks to the FTC leaks, that, hey, consoles are going to be coming out next year, right? It's like Elliewood, and I can't remember the other one name, but the refresh of the Series S and X, which, again, don't read too much into refresh and thinking performance boost, but anyways, we know that hardware is coming next year, so I can't imagine that they're going to do 2 consoles and a controller in the same year, which would mean that we'd be likely looking at potentially a 2025 release, right? They get all this information, they design, they build, they go to assembly about this time starting next year, something like that, for release in the following year. That would be, in my opinion, a logical timeline, because like the engineering has to happen, right? You have to figure out, okay, we're going to do swappable thumbsticks. We got to make all that happen. I could be wrong. Hopefully it comes this year, or this upcoming year in 2024, a year from now. I could be wrong. We will see. Anyways, that's probably our best bit of direct information from Microsoft, that an Elite Series 3 is likely coming in the future. I know that they continue to sell very well for Microsoft, and they want to continue to play in that premium segment. So, as we learn more, make sure to keep it subscribed here, because on the BS on this channel is me.